We're a great big rolling railroad, here's a diesel engine's power. We're 1,000 wheels of freight train doing 90 miles an hour. Like a mighty rushing torrent with the power you can feel surging through our...
Alright, following the same order as the previous crossings video, our first look is here at Kennedy Avenue. This crossing is one of many that is no longer in existence. In 2020, the world corrupted, which led to the first version of this crossing being pulled up, which is what you're looking at right here. And then when I finally got around to rebuilding the alignment in early 2021, it was shunted over less than a block to the west, which is right here, is what you're looking at. But when I rebuilt the West Lapis Point station in 2023-ish, the alignment no longer came through here, so the crossing was ultimately pulled up and abandoned. Moving on to our next crossing on Heathrow Avenue. The crossing itself still exists, but not in its original spot. What you're looking at here is where the crossing used to be at Heathrow and Juniper, right outside the station. But like I said earlier, when I rebuilt this station, it changed how the alignment was handled, so the crossing was shunted further west to the far end of Heathrow Avenue. Now, admittedly, Heathrow technically has two crossings now. The first one here at Heathrow and Copper is for the yard lead, and then the one further back is the one for the main line turning south. Right after Heathrow, we have Redwood Street. Now, as you can tell, this one has changed drastically. This area has had a huge overhaul in the last couple of years, the biggest one being the station and also the apartment complex being demolished to make way for a parking lot. Along with that, this crossing is now 5 tracks. Counting from where the camera is back, tracks 1 and 2 are the main line, track 3 is the yard lead, which starts at the next signal east, and then those last 2 tracks are dead ends into the station. Alright, we'll resume the video in just a second here, folks. Right now we got a hot rail, track 3, player running engine light into River Yard. Moving east, we come up to Federalism Avenue next. Federalism was the first, if not the second, crossing that I ever built on the map. The crossing itself has not changed much, other than the placement of the signals on the north side, but that's kind of it. Moving on, we come up to 14th Street, which is currently closed. Likely only temporarily, but if it does come back, it's going to be downgraded to a footpath, mainly due to the crossing's very close proximity to Federalism, but there is a chance it could come back as a regular vehicle crossing. We'll see. Continuing east, we find ourselves at State Route 132. 132 was originally a below-grade crossing. Tracks went into a trench and went underneath everything. But in an effort to keep things streamlined and not have severe grades in the city area, the whole tunnel thing was axed. For a while, the tracks did go underneath, but when we were deciding to move crossovers around, I had to bring the tracks back up. There was no way they could stay in a trench. Oh yeah, also spoiler alert, the street runner bullshit that used to be here does not exist anymore because it was stupid and made absolutely no sense. So street running is no longer a thing on State Route 132. Moving right along, we come up next to St. Lawrence Boulevard, formerly Civic Center. This is one of the two crossings on St. Lawrence Boulevard. The second one is further north, and we'll get to later in the video. The crossing itself largely remains unchanged, with the only real addition being a cantilever on the north side, and the signals being moved closer to the tracks. The biggest change in this area is arguably the station. A few months ago, I went on a large overhaul spree and rebuilt a ton of stations to bring them up to a new, higher quality. We'll move on to the next crossing in just a minute here. Right now, we have a hot rail on Main Track 1. Got a yard shuttle job heading west. Much like St. Lawrence, University Avenue also remains largely unchanged. One thing I did forget to mention is that University Avenue and Federalism Avenue at some point are going to have their tracks torn up and then rebuilt to be on the same style as Redwood, State Route 132, and St. Lawrence. The next crossing to talk about on this list is Metro Avenue, which has not existed in over 4 years. In 2020, the first version of this map corrupted, and all of the modded blocks and tracks and the like were all forcefully pulled up. Metro Avenue was among many crossings from the first video that did not make the cut when the system was rebuilt. Moving south, the next crossing on the list is Kennedy Boulevard. This crossing sits largely unchanged, and like University Avenue and Federalism Avenue, is yet to have its tracks torn up and rebuilt to match the new style. Along with that, in 2021, during the rebuild, a turnout switch was added that serves a small 2-track storage yard for trains terminating at 8th Street Transit Center. Before we move on south, here's a yard shuttle job taking 2 wrecked boxcars down to the car shop at the Lapis Point docks. A short skip south and we find ourselves at Diamond Road, originally 173rd Street. This road will eventually lead into a new residential development going in, but as of right now the road is closed, but the crossing remains open to construction vehicles. As you can see on the left, new concrete crossing pads are ready for installation and will go in once the wooden crossing structure is torn up. Moving southwest, we find ourselves at the former site of the Jefferson Street Runner crossing. A crossing does still exist on Jefferson Street, but the original placement no longer exists. Similar to Metro Avenue, when the world corrupted, it did not make the cut as part of the system rebuild. Moving directly south now, we come up to modern-day Jefferson Street crossing. For those of you who have seen the first Crossings of Lapis Point video, you'll remember there was a very bullshit street running switch here that swung the line west underneath the freeway. The line still does run vaguely in that direction, though parallel to the freeway instead of underneath it. The line has since been dubbed the Industrial Cutoff, as it allows trains bound for the harbor to cut through the heart of the city instead of having to go around. Following the Industrial Cutoff back westbound, we come up to Mardquart Avenue. Mardquart largely is unchanged, other than having its positioning moved from underneath the freeway to parallel. Next up is Riggerson Street. Similar to Mardquart, it is also parallel to the freeway and no longer underneath. Moving right along, we come up to Carter Street Crossing, formerly Chicago Avenue. Again, no changes other than it is now parallel to the freeway as opposed to underneath. A quick move west, and we come up to Stadium Crossing. Stadium Crossing is technically two different crossings, but their circuit is tied to the same relay box. The first crossing being Alessandro in New Haven, and the second being St. Lawrence, formerly Stadium Drive. Now again, for anybody who has seen the first crossings video, and likely the second one too, you probably remember that there was another street running switch here. The spur swung south down to the harbor, and kept going west before swinging in front of the Walmart. A really fucking stupid decision on my part. Since the big system rebuild, the line now only swings south and does not continue west. The crossing gets its name from the nearby football stadium. Now, before we talk about the new crossings that have been added since the second video, I'm following the order of the first one, so we're going back to State Route 132 briefly to look at the former site of the Street Runner crossing. Again, in 2020, when the world corrupted, this crossing was not re-added because the street running that went south was a stupid fucking decision that I made. Again, following the order of the first crossings video, we now come up to Stevenson Avenue. Now, admittedly, all the alignment changes over the years mean that the tracks no longer come anywhere close to Stevenson Avenue. So while rebuilding the Riverfront Rd, I decided to extend the stem of that Y all the way down to meet Stevenson, crinkle the end of the Y, and put some old crinkle track in between the footpath and the roadway to outline where the crossing once stood, though the placement isn't quite exact to where it was. The last location to cover from the first crossings video brings us over to Lazuli Union Station, or more exactly on Alessandro Street. There used to at one point be a platform here in the street, but again, that was a really stupid fucking decision and was quickly axed from the system during the rebuild. Alright, before we talk about the new stuff, we're really quick going to go over certain crossings that were considered new in the second crossings video. First up on that list is Amusement Avenue. When this crossing first appeared, it was single track and had a switch in the middle of the street that had a spur break out of the main line and run south to the amusement park. In the years since, the switch was torn up, tracks upgraded from single to double, and the station moved to be better spaced between the amusement park and the nearby Lapis Point baseball stadium. As of this video, Amusement Avenue is the biggest crossing on the server, being a double quadrant. Moving to the far south side of town now, we come to the former Red Rock Highway crossing, now known as the Ender Highway. This crossing, as you can tell, no longer exists, as the tracks were torn up when the yard was rebuilt. Turning around, we can now see the updated Ender Highway and State Route 1 crossing. Now, admittedly, this crossing has no equipment yet, as the new angle of the tracks, which were recently rebuilt, has caused a bit of a headache with how we're going to set equipment up for this crossing. So as of now, it sits with nothing, but will likely be only lights and no gates. Continuing on, we now come to the Farmer Lane crossing. Originally, this crossing was quadrant, but it was downgraded to be only wigwags to help fit the small town vibe feel in this area. Keeping with the order of the second crossings video, we now find ourselves in the small town of Frankton, at the site of the former Frankton Boulevard crossing. A crossing does still exist on this road, but not in the town of Frankton. In the last 3.5 years, the alignment has been rebuilt twice, with the tracks now going around the town to the north instead of going through. In the same rebuilding phases, the crossing here at Coast Road was also removed. That concludes the updated look at all of the old crossings. Now we're moving on to the new stuff. First up on that list is the new Frankton Boulevard crossing over here at Control Point Frank. Control Point Frank is where the Textile subdivision meets the Lazuli subdivision. Admittedly, there's nothing special about this crossing. It's just a stop sign and some crossbucks. Does make for a good rail fanning spot though, as you will see in the next video coming out, which will be action across the system. Moving back into the town of Frankton, we now come to the new Coast Road crossing. This crossing sits to the west of the new Frankton Depot and just to the south of the Frankton Airport. We'll continue the showcase of the new stuff here in just a moment. Right now we got a yard switcher coming up with empty centerbeam cars for the Frankton Sawmill. Moving northward, we come to the Duncan Avenue crossing. This crossing sits in the middle of Control Point Dunk, where the Frankton Industry Spur breaks out of the main line. Once again, punting northward, we find ourselves at the Riverfront Rd crossing. This crossing is one of the very few large-scale quadrant crossings left on the map. Once again, sliding just a little bit north of that crossing, we come to the second Riverfront Rd crossing, or at least what remains of it. This crossing used to be where the Union Cutoff broke out of the main line and swung east. Recently, I decided to make Union Station a stub-end station instead of a run-through, so the need for this line no longer existed and the crossing was removed. Moving east down that old, now torn up spur, we come to the crossing that used to sit next to the Lapis Point Zoo. This crossing originally appeared in the video Rail Fanning the Morning Rush and was torn up with the rest of the Union Cutoff. Continuing our move north, we now come to the private road crossing that sits on the access road that goes into the River Yard Transload dock. Spinning the camera around, we get a look at the 4-track Riverfront Road crossing that goes into the River Yard Transload warehouse. And then, of course, just north of that is the pedestrian crossing into the Lapis Point Park station. Now, I do want to note I'm not showing activations on these last couple crossings because I'm saving those for the Action Across the System video. Moving right along, we come to Broadway Boulevard crossing, formerly Renegade Boulevard. This crossing has not changed at all since it was featured in its own video, Renegade Crossing. That video can still be found on the channel. I suggest you go check it out after this video. Moving back over towards the football stadium, we now come to St. Lawrence's pedestrian crossing, which exists right in front of the stadium. Nothing real special about this one. And of course, just south of that is the crossing for St. Lawrence's footpath and St. Lawrence Boulevard itself. The boulevard swings east here, but the tracks continue south. Moving south ourselves, that brings us to the Santa Fe Boulevard crossing. This crossing is on the north side of the DT junction and is where the industry cutoff swings east to rejoin the main line. A spur breaks out of the industry cutoff here and continues south to serve a newspaper industry. Moving south down that spur brings us to the gateless Conelly Street crossing. Moving south once again brings us to the last crossing on that spur at Shirley Avenue. This crossing sits just outside the newspaper industry that I mentioned earlier. Moving back into the heart of downtown, we come to the crossing on Lazuli Way. This crossing sits right between DT Junction and Control Point Union and makes a very excellent rail fanning hotspot, as you'll be able to see all local trains coming out of Union Station, along with some through freights, and of course, the 10-head signals guarding both directions. Once again moving east, we now come to the crossing on Pine Street. The Pine Street crossing sits in the heart of DT Junction and, similar to Lazuli Way, is an excellent rail fanning hotspot, as here you can see the industry cutoff make its swing east to rejoin the main line along with the downtown diamond. Moving southeast, we now come to the former State Route 182 crossing. This crossing was grade separated when the Marina Classification Yard was rebuilt. Moving east brings us to the Harbor Way crossing. This crossing sits right next to the entrance to the harbor for both road and rail. Just east of that is the crossing on Wright Avenue, formerly Industry Way. Like the last three crossings, Wright Avenue makes a very good rail fanning hotspot as it sits right next to Harbor Junction. 4 different routes converge here: the Lazuli Subdivision, the Snowden Spur, the Frankton Cutoff, and the Airport Spur. Moving north on the Airport Spur brings us to the crossing at Ocean Way. Ocean Way will likely be the first crossing you will see on the server, as server spawn will be set inside the International Airport. Moving back south brings us to the crossing on Novo Way. This crossing sits just outside of a transload warehouse and is also the first crossing of the Frankton Cutoff. Moving south from there brings us to the crossing at Ziti Street. And the last crossing of the video brings us all the way up to St. Lawrence Avenue on the north side of town. Only real special note about this crossing is that it is a quad. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you guys in the next video, Action Across the System. Goodbye for now.
Shut your mouth and go to 3030.
Show 2 bikes getting in.